College football fans everywhere, Longhorn fans everywhere, it's time to lock in as we are now officially, as it is Sunday, August 24th, the year of our Lord 2025, less than 7 days away until kickoff between Texas and Ohio State, the AP number 1 and number 3 team to kick off the season in Columbus. We're already past week 0 and we're heading into week 1, which I consider the official start of college football season, and we're less than 2 weeks away from the kickoff of the NFL regular season as we're wrapping up the preseason. And by the way, shout out to all of the Longhorn players and alumni that are absolutely showing out in preseason. That's been awesome to watch. Sam Ellinger had a good performance recently. Jaden Blue scored his first touchdown of the preseason a couple nights ago.
Yep.
So that's been really fun to watch. Matthew Golden's making plays, as I expected. But we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to have another episode hopefully later this week, right before the games. We'll figure that out later. But on today's episode, fall camp is over. The team is in now game week. It's game prep for Ohio State. It's been that way since Monday. Okay. We're now in game week, officially starting tomorrow, Monday, where Sark will have his first game week press conference of the year as the team gets ready for Ohio State. So we're going to do our final two deep depth chart projections on both sides of the ball. We're going to hit on the major position groups that you absolutely need to know and how we project those to play out going into this specific game against the Ohio State Buckeyes. At the end of the episode, if you caught our last episode, and thank you to everyone who have been watching those episodes, our viewership is way up than it's ever been before. We greatly appreciate that. We're going to do the same thing that we did on offense for defense today. And what is that? We'll go position group by position group on the defense, and we'll say upgraded, downgraded, or neutral compared to last year. But before we get into any of that, there was big news earlier this week, and that is Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, in the entire conference announcing after what feels like years of conversation that they are moving officially from an 8-game conference schedule to a 9-game conference schedule starting next season in 2026. So, with that being said, we're going to start with a conversation on our opinions on this matter, and I will pass it off to my co-host, Emmy, obviously my fantastic co-host who joins me every time here on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports to give his thoughts on this matter. Emmy, do you like it? Do you not like it? And why or why not?
I love it, man. I think first off, SEC football, like SEC on SEC football, we get the better, just generally speaking. But I think as we kind of move towards this inevitability, like idea of two super conferences, I think this was like another step towards that. And that part, I don't know what I feel about it because, first of all, like, how would that even look? And like, are the ACC and the Big 12 just going to collapse? Like, there's so many questions like behind that idea. But I for this segment in particular, I'd rather not think about that. Like, more so just in the present, having 9 conference games is what's best for college football. Um, I think teams will kind of prioritize getting those like good non-conference games, and because there's only going to be, I think, 3 of them now. So we'll have the Texas playing Ohio State. That'll still happen. Like things like that, games like that will still happen. But all of those marquee matchups that we haven't yet to see, like Texas against LSU and Texas playing Tennessee, and like all of these like key SEC like traditional SEC teams that Texas hasn't played yet. We're going to get to see that every 2 years, which is extremely exciting.
Yeah, you hit on some of the benefits. I love this move for a lot of reasons. Let's just fly through some of them really quick. The financial benefits are a three-way street. Okay. This obviously benefits the television networks. More high profile matchups mean more games for these networks to air, specifically ESPN and ABC, who currently have the television rights to the SEC. Um, and that means increased revenue not only for the television networks, who already make a ton of money off these games, just an extra game, more money, but it means more money for the conference and more money, therefore, for the individual programs within the conference. So that's like a three-way street right there. That's the most obvious benefit, okay? If we talk about recruiting, which we do a lot on this show, and there will be more of that conversation coming later in the fall. This gives all the SEC programs an extra game to showcase their programs, bring recruits in for visits, more games against high level opponents within the conference. What does it feel like? What is the experience playing games in these different venues within the conference? There are so many great venues out there and environments. Just an extra week to showcase what we can do for these recruits that are coming in for unofficial fall visits. Um, it's going to benefit a lot of these programs in recruiting, which I think is great. And then the obvious benefits for the college football fan also have to play into this. Okay, one more SEC game, adding that ninth conference game. Every SEC team faces an extra tough opponent within the conference, which is great. It raises the level of competition and it creates more equality within the scheduling world of college football as a whole. If you think about where the Big Ten is, what do? They play 9 conference games. When Texas was in the Big 12, when Texas and OU were in the Big 12, what were they doing? They were playing 9 conference games. Okay, the only Power 4 conference now to not play 9 conference games starting next year will be the ACC. And I will harp on this until it happens. I think they need to go to 9 conference games because I think that creates a more equal playing field. Every conference playing 9 conference games, an equal amount of conference games. You're never going to get to I don't think we're ever going to get to a system in college football where you can like compare schedules like for like, because an SEC schedule and a Big Ten schedule, it's just different than a Big 12 or an ACC schedule. Um, but that creates more equality throughout the conferences, playing those 9 conference games. And it's great for us fans because there are a couple things that we have to remember. There are a couple stipulations, if you will, within this change that people have to remember. One you brought up indirectly, and that is we're going to get every team's going to play their 3 main rivals every year, home and away. You just switch off every year, home and away. And so if we think about it for Texas in particular, that will likely be OU, Arkansas, and A&M. Those will probably most likely be their 3 main rivals that they play every year, and I love that aspect of it. Rivalries are one of the biggest, like, things in college football,
Yeah.
uh, and we love those rivalries. There are obviously the big-time ones that we think about and look forward to every year, but it'll help showcase maybe some of the rivalry games that we don't get to see that often. And we're going to get to see them on their respective home turfs, if that makes sense, and those unique environments that make college football so unique. So you get those 3 rivalry games every year, and it'll make for just better viewership, more entertainment. Who's dominating these rivalries? It's going to be great. Okay. But also, the other 6 games that you play in conference are going to be rotated every couple years. So you'll play these 6 teams for the first 2 years, and then you'll switch over to the next 6 teams, and you'll do it home and away. So a 4-year player in this conference is going to get to play in every single venue in the SEC over a 4-year time period. That's awesome. A lot of these players haven't even been to Athens, Georgia, or been to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or been to Columbia, right? or been to wherever, been to Knoxville to play Tennessee, play in that Neyland Stadium environment. All of those things make this decision so great. It should have happened earlier, in my opinion, but better late than never.
Yeah, the thing I think about too is like I think it's going to bring up the level of talent acquisition teams can have like across the SEC. Like obviously, not every SEC team can be good at the same time, but like just in general, like I think of like a team like Missouri or Arkansas that are kind of on the fringes of like hanging around, 6-6, 7-5 every year, or maybe below that. I think teams like that are going to be able to, go in the transfer portal and be like, hey, like, I know you got, crazy production over there in the MAC, but you want to go play with come play with the big boys. Like, come to the SEC, play for us for a year, and then go to the NFL. So I think that kind of stuff, like, it's already happening, but I think it can start happening way more for some of those, like, kind of, um, I guess, non-traditional contender SEC teams, like the Kentuckys of the world, the teams of that nature.
This is something that a lot of the pundits out there, including my favorite, Josh Pate, have been talking about for a while now. And that is, um, I think fan bases might, with these expanded conferences and with these expanded conference schedules moving forward, are going to need to actively recalibrate their expectations on the fly.
Yeah.
In that, in a lot of these big time programs, the ones that are perennial, the ones that we view as perennial contenders for the playoff and national championship, Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, these kinds, Alabama, these kinds of programs, a
Mhm.
9-3 season is viewed as a down year at a lot of these programs. It's viewed pejoratively in a bad way. Like 9-3 in Tuscaloosa, that is no. That's a no.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be tough for a lot of these fan bases. The programs that have been winning consistently at a high level for a long time, and even some of the new bloods that are trying to get back to that point, to think about a 9-3 season in a good way. Because with these extra games, with having to schedule at least one like high level non-conference game, which is another aspect of this that I love. Three I wonder, just like in the future, starting next year, whatever the playoff format is moving forward, we won't really get clarity to this answer until we know that. Do they stay at 12? Do they go to 16? I don't know what's going to happen. That's the next thing we kind of have to figure out. But I wonder, is 9-3 going to be the new 10-2? Could it become that moving forward with these extra conference games and expanded conferences?
Yeah. I mean, that's very possible. And with the college football playoff continuing to have conversations of expanding, I mean, all of a sudden, winning 75% of your games doesn't even sound that bad, if you're talking about a 20 something team playoff, which that's a whole other discussion that we won't get into right now. But oh my gosh, like it changes how we view the regular season completely.
Yep. Okay. Well, both of us seem to be in favor of the decision. And I think a lot of SEC fan bases, the entire conference, in the college football world, most of the people that I've spoken to are really in favor of this decision. Most of the podcasts that I've listened to in favor of this decision. So better late than never. And I look forward to next year, especially. What does Texas's schedule, since this is a Longhorn podcast, look like next year? If you think about it, Ohio State's coming here next year.
Mhm.
Okay. The home and home. And then in 2027, they're picking back up with Michigan, right? They played Michigan last year. Michigan's coming here in 2027. Okay, and then Texas also has some. One thing the Longhorns have done a great job of, even way before they were, you know, winning at this level, is scheduling non-conference. That's the one thing you cannot say about Texas is they have not been scared to schedule big time games out of conference. You think about when they were in the Big 12 in the Charlie Strong years, Notre Dame came here for a game. You remember that game? It was like
Yeah.
50 something in overtime.
Yeah.
Um, LSU in the Joe Burrow year was here for a game. Alabama in the home and home that they played in the 2 years leading up to Texas joining the SEC, right? Even in the Charlie Strong years, which we don't like to remember, but those Maryland teams that came in, like it's not the Alabama or an LSU, but those are challenging games. Okay. Those
Yeah. It's not like
powerful
you're
games.
bringing in, Tarleton State or something.
Those are the kind of games that we're going to get to see more of because they have to schedule at least one of those games now moving forward. And so these teams are going to be, you'll still probably have those 2 weeks as always where these SEC teams are maybe playing G5 level or below competition. But every team every year is going to be playing like 10 Power Four conference games. And I love that. That's the way it should be. Um, and the harder your schedule is, the better it is for your hopes to go to the playoff. Because that's something they harp on every single year is strength of schedule. Think about what we listened to all of last year. What was the thing that fans were saying about Texas last year? What, like their schedule? They kept banging on their schedule. Like
Yeah.
Michigan didn't end up being anything great. Florida was kind of in a downturn to start conference play, and when Texas played them, it just so happened that they were at their weakest because DJ Lagway was out.
Right.
They got banged on for their schedule last year, but going forward, that's not going to be the case. Even this year, like at Ohio State, at Florida, and at Georgia, are kind of those games that are going to determine, um, along with their rivalry games, the games that will kind of determine what direction, what trajectory this season is going to have for Texas.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
so, with that, let's move on to the meat of the episode, and that is fall camp is over. Yesterday, the team had its final scrimmage, but it wasn't a scrimmage. It was more so a mock game. They do this every year, the Saturday before game week. And what they do is they stay in a hotel the night before the game, like they will on Friday night, the night before the Ohio State game. And like they do for home games, even, they do stay in a hotel night before games. They go through their team meetings. They wake up early. They simulate what a game day would look like, the bus ride over to the stadium, everything like that. They simulate warm-ups, getting into the locker room, the pregame speech, going out onto the field, just what it's going to feel like. Because a lot of these freshmen, a lot of these newcomers don't know what it's going to be like. And then they kind of have what I call like a mock game, but it's more of a walkthrough. They're not putting anyone at risk. They're not tackling to the ground, but they're going through like substitutions and things of this nature. They're simulating what it's going to feel like on game day, start to
Yeah.
finish. And so the depth chart's been determined. We don't know exactly what it looks like yet. We could get it tomorrow. Sometimes they release it the Monday at game week. Last year, they ended up releasing it like the day of the first game. So I don't know when that's going to officially be released. We'll get it at some point, but we're going to be projecting based on what I've heard and maybe, Emmy, what some of you've heard, if you've heard anything about what the rotation is going to look like on offense or defense. So I'll kind of let you start us off. You can start us on offense or defense, and then you can kind of lead us into the conversation wherever you want to take us.
Yeah. I mean, starting with the wide receiver room,
Mm-hmm.
um, I expect it to be Wingo, um, Parker Livingstone, and the third guy in that group, it's going to be between DeAndre Moore and Emmett Mosley, but I expect Moore to start because he's been in the program. And he has that kind of built-in, I guess, year of reps with Arch Manning from last year, from being on the second team. Same with Parker Livingstone as well. But that's how I expect it to be with those top three guys in the starting lineup. But even still, Mosley's going to play a lot. I expect even like a even like a Dalen McCutcheon to play a lot as well. So I think those five guys are going to get the brunt of the workload from a wide receiver standpoint.
From the start of camp, the wide receiver position was one of the toughest to nail down exactly how that rotation is going to play out, especially amongst the depth, the guys behind the frontline starters. I can tell you right now, the first three guys on the field, barring some major surprise, it's going to be the three guys you mentioned. It's going to be Parker Livingston and Ryan Wingo, and then it's going to be DeAndre Moore. Now, based on what I've heard, Emmett Mosley's been a limited participant because he's dealing with something. I don't know what it is. I think once we get later on into the season, he could become a bigger part of the offense. That's what they got him for. He has the versatility to play the slot and outside. But for this game at Ohio State, I'm kind of unsure what his role is going to look like or if he's going to play. I've actually heard that similarly to you, Dalen McCutcheon and Kalik Lockett in particular are the guys amongst the freshmen that have really emerged towards the end of camp. I agree with you. I think you could see Dalen McCutcheon get a couple targets, and I also think you could see Kalik Lockett actually get some targets. I don't necessarily know that I don't think this is an indictment upon maybe a Jamie French or a Michael Terry. This is just where things stand currently. I think you're going to see all these guys play once they get past this game and you get into those September games against Sam Houston State, uh, San Jose State, and UTEP. I think those are the three. But right now, it's going to be Parker Livingstone, Ryan Wingo, and DeAndre Moore. And then I think you could see Dalen McCutcheon and or Kalik Lockett, or maybe both, get a couple targets as well. I want to talk about the offensive line, but before we do that, let's hit on running back. We've talked about this a lot. Sarkisian has had a change in tone in the way that he's talked about the running back position. And what do I mean by that? Well, at the beginning of camp, it was more of we're going to see how CJ Baxter practices, how he reacts to these practices, how he's recovering from these practices, these physical practices once we put on pads. And we're going to ease him into this. But after the first scrimmage or two, after the second scrimmage, he was like, he's going to play. Like, he's going to play a lot because he has looked really good in camp. He's even said it himself. He was more excited to get tackled than he was to actually score a touchdown in the scrimmage because that builds confidence in the knee, right? Getting hit for the first time and bouncing back up, that's how you kind of build confidence. You haven't been hit in a while. And so I think he's super confident in CJ Baxter. He's always been that way, but it seems like his recovery is finally on the up and up. And if I had to say right now, and you can tell me if you agree, I think it's Wisner 1A and Baxter 1B with Christian Clark a clear number 3 ahead of both Ricky Stewart, James Simon, and Jarrett Gibson. That's how I would kind of categorize the running back position right now.
Yeah, no, I that's exactly how I see it. Also, um, from like a down to down standpoint, do you see it more so like Christian Clark in on like just
Passing
to
down.
get on passing downs or to give the
Mm-hmm.
other guys a breather? But like what have you heard in terms of Christian Clark's pass blocking prowess as of right now?
Um, I think in terms of like if you think about who's going to be their best pass protector, it might actually be a guy like Christian Clark.
Hmm.
I haven't heard specific reports on what that looks like, but I mean, I don't worry about that too much. Arch is going to be mobile. They're going to move the
Yeah,
pocket with him.
true.
Um, I think especially in this game against Ohio State, they're going to be doing that a lot, trying to move the point of launch, right? Get this Ohio State defense moving laterally. Sark loves to do that with all this misdirection and pre-snap motion. Um, and they're going to play a lot of 12 personnel. So it's going to be one running back, two tight ends. Likely in that case, it'll be Jack injuries and maybe like a Spencer Shannon, more of like a blocking tight end. Um, and they're gonna use those tight ends to kind of help chip, right? To help these young tackles, help the offensive line a little bit. So I don't know like how much the running backs are actually going to be involved in blocking, but I'm guessing they'll. I mean, that's something they have to have had training on, right? I mean, practice. I think Baxter, just because of his size, um, could be a really good, useful asset in pass protection, but I don't want to put him at risk more than you have to. So I think the tight ends are going to be used more so for that. I've seen Sark put tight ends in the backfield. Like they would put Juan Davis in the backfield just to serve as like a blocking, an extra blocker for the quarterback for Quinn. So
Yeah.
I think it could look something like that. The biggest position battle that I've been focused on offensively outside of the running back rotation and the right tackle position, which are the last two things we kind of need to hit on here before we move to the defense. Backup quarterback.
Right.
I think this has been won by Matthew Caldwell. Based on what I heard from multiple outlets, Matthew Caldwell took all of the second team quarterback reps yesterday in the mock game. He is clearly ahead of both um, Trey Owens and KJ Lacey. And those two guys have been fighting for that third quarterback spot. And I have nothing ever against Trey Owens. I don't know what specifically is the problem there. I think it's consistency based on what I've heard from practice to practice. But if the younger guy is even, the younger guy is leaving, if that makes sense. And so I think if they think KJ Lacey is even with Trey Owens or even a little bit better, I kind of lean KJ Lacey there. I don't now. None of those guys have any experience. I think the main reason Matthew Caldwell won this job is because when he came in late in the summer, he quickly picked up the playbook. He's played in Big Ten environments. He's played in Power Four conference games. He's won those games before. And so he's going to be the backup. He had a really good fall camp, really good second scrimmage based on what I heard. And I just kind of feel a little bit more security with him than I do the other two guys if something were to happen to Arch for a drive or two in
Yeah.
that Ohio State game.
Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely the experience factor to me. And that's the whole reason they brought him in the first place. It's just that quarterback room is super young. I mean, with the fact that Arch Manning is the veteran in that room, if you don't count Matthew Caldwell, and he started 2 games. It wasn't a concern, but I think it was good thinking from Texas to kind of like bring a grown up into the room, so to speak, because just giving Trey Owens like that little bit of fire under his ass instead of just okay, here's the backup job, Trey Owens, here you go.
Yeah.
It's a little bit better that way. I think Trey Owens kind of has that sense of urgency now, like hey, like I gotta really fight for this third quarterback job now.
Nothing is given, everything is earned in today's world of college football, especially at a program like Texas, where if you're not meeting the standard, they have someone to replace you.
Yep.
Let's quickly hit on the offensive line, specifically the tackle positions. Trevor Gooseby, starter at left tackle. The only note there is he's been dealing with some sort of hand injury. Shouldn't affect him too much. Based on everything I've heard, not going to affect his availability for Ohio State, but they've been holding him out or limiting him in some of these practices just so nothing gets worse. It's nothing to really worry about or scream fire in a crowded theater heading into this week unless we hear differently. But we're going to shoot it straight on this podcast. That's what's been happening. He's dealing with some sort of hand injury. Doesn't need surgery. I think it's pretty minor based on everything Sarkisian has said.
Right.
They had some physical practices this past week. I think their last physical practice before the Ohio State game was on Thursday. And they've just kind of been like, he's a guy who doesn't need that many practice reps. But I think everything should be okay. His backup is going to be Jaden Chapman, based on what I've heard. So he's kind of the third swing tackle right now, based on what I've heard. And then that fourth guy would be a guy like Nick Brooks, who's a freshman. So I'm interested to see like how good is Jaden Chapman. He's a guy that has been on campus for a couple years. I've heard good things about how he looks, but that's going to be important. And then obviously right tackle, that job's going to Brandon Baker. It was his job to lose, especially once Kojo went down with the knee injury. His development, as we mentioned on the last podcast and on podcast previous, is going to be like arguably the biggest question that will be answered over the course of this season. Again, killer out-of-state 5-star prospect. If he hits, he's the kind of guy that will be a first-round draft pick someday. Anything else that you want to hit on specifically on the offensive line, or do you want to move over to the defense?
Not on the offensive line, but offense in general. I did want to just shout out Diabell from Friday night, down 28-0 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter, and then they came back to win that game. I almost turned that game off, and then all of a sudden it was just like, bam, they were back in it. That's just high school football for you. But yeah,
it was a rough
shout out to Diabell.
It was kind of a rough go of it for like
Yeah.
the first quarter and a half. American Heritage's offense, not to get too much off on a tangent, was struggling, and it was kind of rainy. The game was delayed for an hour and a half because of a lightning delay. And the, St. Joseph's was getting a lot of pressure, and Bell had 2 fumbles lost. But what I really liked out of Diabell more than anything else in that game was just like he was never flustered in any way. He was never panicky in any way. Kind of like Arch Manning in what we've seen of him in his young career. Like, I think that's what Sark likes to see, if I had to guess. That quick memory and the ability to lead that second half comeback. Awesome. Awesome job by Diabell. But that's what we expect from the number 1 quarterback in the country.
Yeah.
Let's move to but good shout out there. Good shout out. And also shout out Derek Cooper. He's been showing out so far early on in his season.
Yeah.
Defensively, where do you want to take us? You have a specific topic you want to hit on?
I think let's start with that safety group. That's one that's been well documented as having a abundance of talent, but not really knowing what the hierarchy might look like there. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at our lads here, and what I see is obviously Taff and then Derek Williams Jr. In that starting group. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if this is updated and accurate, but if I were to guess, I think it would be something like that. And then obviously, the Jalen Gilbo in that star spot.
After the second scrimmage, which would have been last Saturday, Sark came out in like his press conference afterwards, and he said specifically, we think we have 15 or 16 starters on defense.
Yeah.
And 3 of those guys are safeties. He thinks they have 3 starting level safeties, and those guys would be the obvious ones. The 2 you mentioned plus Jelani McDonald. But here's the catch, 22. Jelani McDonald and Michael Taft have the versatility to slide down to that nickel spot, the star position, which Grayson Littleton has been working a lot in with the ones. I think that's the biggest thing we're watching in this secondary. One of the biggest like rotation battles that we're watching in this secondary going into the Ohio State game is what is the division of labor going to look like, specifically with the safeties and at that star nickel position. We know it's going to be Malik Muhammad on one side, and it's likely going to be Jesus, why am I blanking on his name? Gilbo, Jalen Gilbo slash Kobe Black, maybe some on the other side. So it's going to be Gilbo and Muhammad, and then I think you're going to rotate those 3 guys in. I think the key here is, where is Derek Williams at with his health? Is he healthy enough to play? Is he one of your 5 best guys that you can have on the field against Ohio State? Because that's what you want against this in this level of game. They're going to get their 5, what they view as their 5 best guys out there as much as they can. If Derek Williams isn't healthy, I think you're going to see a lot where they're going to play Grayson Littleton at nickel, like he's been playing a lot with the starters, and you're going to have Michael Taft and Jelani McDonald back at safety. If Derek Williams is healthy, they'll slide McDonald in down to that star position where he's so versatile and can played last season, and they'll rotate him in with Grayson Littleton, and then they'll play Derek Williams and Michael Taft at safety. But we know there are 3 starting level safeties. 2 of them have the versatility to slide down and play that nickel position. And that should make Texas fans really excited about the versatility of this position group.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of Grayson Littleton, on our lads here, he's listed as the 4th string cornerback, which just goes to show you like just how good he's been in camp. For him to already be like a week 1 like key part of this defense, like it's just, I mean, we've talked about it a bunch on the pod already. I don't want to be a broken record, but my gosh, like that dude has like a bright future, is putting it lightly.
A couple quick things at linebacker before we hit on the last thing I want to hit on, which is the interior defensive line. It's pretty straightforward, but there's one specific guy I want to hit on. We know Ant Hill's going to play pretty much all the snaps.
Right.
And they're going to have Leona Lafau in there initially as the starter. It's been that way. I expect it to stay that way. He's going to play, I think, a lot, especially on those early downs. But based on what I've heard and what I've been reading from people that I trust, if you were to name the 5 biggest winners from fall camp, maybe the guy at the top of that list, one of the guys at the top of that list would be Ty Anthony Smith. His emergence has been real over the past couple of weeks. He's been one of the stars of the show on defense. I think you're going to see Ty Anthony Smith a lot on 3rd downs. He's going to have a much expanded role. I think it's going to be similar to the role that it's going to be like a mixture of the roles of David Binda and Maurice Blackwell last year. He's going to be in there on passing downs. He has the ability to cover. We've seen that a little bit already. And he's just quick. And so you're going to see him a lot on 3rd downs. He's probably going to play like a third of the snaps defensively this year, similar to the snap share of a David Binda last year. It's going to be exciting to watch him and his development. over the
Yeah, I
next
think
couple weeks.
slightly bigger version of like Demarvia and Overshown as well.
Mhm.
Like that, I think that it's going to be in that mold, kind of just that heat-seeking missile of a pass defender in that middle of the defense.
Yep. Okay, and then lastly, but not completely least, um, things have been changing along the interior defensive line. Emmy, have you heard anything specifically on what you think that's going to look like with these transfers and Alex January and guys like this? Do you have any feel for what that might look like going into Ohio State before I give my thoughts on it?
Yeah, my feel is that it's going to be Murad Watson and Alex January sharing time on that interior, and on in terms of like starting. But of course, it's going to be a deep rotation here.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you got Travis Shaw, Cole
Yep.
Brevard's going to be in there quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Even, I mean, some of the other transfers, Hero Canoe,
Yep.
Levon Johnson, those guys are
Mm-hmm.
all going to play. But the two main guys that I'll be keeping an eye on are definitely Murad Watson and Alex January. Those were the two guys that I heard kind of have that higher upside
Yep.
to make this defensive line into like not just like a dominant edge group, but just a dominant line in general, like across it.
I think I think we've been reading the same thing or watching the same thing. I don't know what it is, but you're exactly right. Um, Legitimately, like I had Murad Watson and Alex January written down as the starters. Because I've heard multiple reports from the last week or two of practice where those have been the first guys working, getting the bulk of the work with the first team. And good for Alex January. Like, I wonder what it had to feel like for him, for Texas to bring in all of these transfers for the
Yeah.
second year in a row. It's like, whoa, I better be on my A game. And now going into game week, it feels like he's won that job. Um, and he's a guy with a lot of potential. And they brought in Murad Watson. That was one of the biggest gets of this portal class, freshman All American. So if you would have asked me this question after spring ball or early on in the summer, I had Cole Brevard as a starter. But I mean, if we really look at this, those guys might be the first out on the field, but they're going to rotate in Cole Brevard just because of his sheer mass and size. He's going to be really hard to move in the run game.
Yeah.
The one guy I really don't know what to think of yet is Travis Shaw. It feels like he's a guy who, especially at North Carolina, when he flashes, it looks like a 5-star. He looks like the 5-star that he was. He looks like he could be a day 1 or day 2 pick. But it's been that consistency, similar to how we viewed Alfred Collins in his first couple of years at Texas.
Yeah. Or Renner
Um,
Broughton as well.
yeah, getting that out of him is going to be key. So I don't know. I think he's going to play, but I feel like if I were to set the two deep, it would be Alex January and Murad Watson, and then it would be Cole Brevard and Hero Canoe, because I've heard really good things about Hero Canoe. And then they'll obviously, if they need to, rotate in Travis Shaw and rotate in Levon Johnson, or maybe a Justice Terry or a Lance Jackson, depending on if those guys are ready to play the interior. But yeah, that's kind of how I view it as well. The one question mark I still have on this defensive line is the one mystery, I should say, is Travis Shaw. Like, is he going to be the guy that we think he can be, or is he more of just like a Bill Norton rotational depth piece, or even something less than that? But it's exciting to see a guy like it's exciting to see, like, if you really think about the depth chart, like how much of that 2023 recruiting class is going to be on the field. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. Like Arch Manning, CJ Baxter, um, the list goes on and on. Alex January, I guess he was 2024, but like Anthony Hill, Derek Williams. Malik Muhammad. Like, it's a lot. Imagine if Jonte Cook was still on this team.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. Pretty exciting stuff. Okay. Well, we're on a really good pace. I'm impressed with how fast we got through that. Anything else from a depth chart stand? This is our last depth chart conversation because later this week we're going to be. I want to do our predictions. I want to go through our top 4 or 5 finishers in the SEC and Big Ten, players of the year, sleeper team, kind of do like a superlative segment, our predictions for conference champions and maybe even the playoff later this week. And maybe like our official Texas predictions as well. I haven't figured that out, but it'll be something like that. So last in-depth roster conversation. Anything else that you want to hit on?
I think if there was anyone in the edge group, I guess that I would be keeping my eye on, like as like a underrated guy out of that group that could have a big year, it would be probably Colton Vasek. I've been hearing good things from him. He's had a tough time staying healthy, but with
Yep.
how deep this group is, he's going to be, you know, they're going to be managing his snaps, and then they're basically just going to be trying to keep him healthy the entire season, and just trying to keep him around and have him be healthy for that home stretch of the season. And that's going to be the key part. But when he's out there, I expect him to be very productive.
Same here. Okay, let's play this game again. We did this with offense last week, and we're going to do it with defense this week. So the way this is going to work, we're going to go through interior defensive line, edge, linebacker, and then secondary as a whole, just to make it easier. And we're going to say upgraded, downgraded, or neutral compared to last year, what we expect. So let's start with interior defensive line. What is your feel on that right now?
Well, given that, we had two like close to top 100 picks on the interior defensive line, it would be tough to say upgraded, just because Alfred Collins was just so good. And I think even Vernon Broughton, like I think the season he had last year might even be underrated, like among Texas fans. I'm kind of inclined to say we're just doing defensive tackles, right?
Yep.
I'm kind of inclined to say slightly downgraded, just because last year you had guys that had been in the program and had years of getting playing time, and this year, even the guys that had been in the program, like Alex January, for example, he didn't get much playing time last year. He was a freshman. You wouldn't really have expected him to get much playing time. But regardless, I think having guys that had been in the program, and even if they had been backups, had been getting playing time and know the system, to go along with the transfers brought in, I think that's an important element that this year might be missing. So expecting them to hit the ground running right from the get-go might be a little bit more of a stretch, compared to the expectation last year. So I will say slightly downgraded.
I agree. For slightly different reasons, but when you look at this group, I think the overall talent, top to bottom, is actually upgraded from last year. Just pure talent,
Right.
because of this recruiting class. And if you can, especially if you throw in a guy like a Lance Jackson or Justice Terry as an interior defensive lineman, right now those guys might be more edge defensive end types, but like in the future, those are the kind of guys that are projected to slide down into the 3 technique. Maybe a Justice Terry or Lance Jackson, possibly both. So once their bodies get to that point, I think from an overall talent standpoint, it's actually better than last year. But from what I expect and what we've seen on the field from the guys they brought in outside of a Cole Brevard / Murad Watson at their respective last stops. You'd have to say it's probably slightly downgraded. I think they can be about equal in the run game. But where I kind of worry about this interior group is creating pressure.
Right.
I don't know that any of these guys at their last stops were known for creating pressure on the quarterback the way that an Alfred Collins or even a Vernon Broughton could last year. So I'll say slightly downgraded as well. I think if you're a Texas fan and this is a neutral group to last year, you're satisfied with that because of how good everything else is around it. So let's move to edge. Upgraded, downgraded, or neutral?
Yeah, this one's easy for me. This one's an upgrade.
Yep.
I don't know how you could really say anything other than that, given that you're heading into year 2 with Colin Simmons. Everything we've talked about with what we expect from him and his jump in year 2. You also add in the fact that Ethan Burke's coming back, Colton Vasek, I mentioned earlier as well. But it really just comes down to Colin Simmons. And then, of course, you do have Trey Moore still. He's kind of moving into the kind of linebacker hybrid role. But Trey Moore is still going to get some edge snaps. He's still there. He had a really good finish to last season as well. So I expect this edge group to be really well positioned to be one of the best in the country. And, we did lose Baron Sorrell, who was a, 4th round pick, but he's a big loss in terms of leadership in that room. But I also think like his prowess wasn't in terms of like rushing the passer. His prowess will really be felt in kind of that edge rush run defense, kind of setting the edge.
One of the stars of the summer in this Texas program was Allen Clark, who's now the edge coach. They have an edge coach now specifically for this room. And not just on the recruiting trail, but like these guys love Allen Clark and the energy that he brings. Based on what I've heard from inside the program, the starters are great. Ethan Burke, I think he's going to have a big bounce back year. He's kind of inconsistent last year. I expect big things from him.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of slimmed down a little bit, which I like. And then you have Colin Simmons, who's special, probably could be the best defensive player in college football. So he's going to year 2. Expect big things from him. And then behind him is where you get really excited. I'm really excited about a guy named Zena Umeozulu, the brother of Neto, who's going to be the starting left guard for Texas this year. Those two guys are going to be big time, I think.
Yeah.
Zena's really talented. He was overlooked in that recruiting class because of a Colin Simmons, but they love that kid. They worked really hard to get him. So I think he's going to have a big year. And then, like, if Colton Bassett catches on, forget about it. And then you add in a guy like Brad Spence, who just, 6.5 sacks last year in the SEC. You add him to the edge rotation a little bit. You throw in maybe some Trey Moore into that group. And you're not even getting down to guys like Justice Terry or Lance Jackson by that point. So it's upgraded. It's Texas at edge is like so insane. It's unbelievable. I'll lead us off at linebacker. I've already said this. I think the linebacker position is actually going to be an upgrade from last year. And that's saying something, but I just view the overall depth of this room to be the best it's been in a couple years since they had the DeMarvion Overshown, Jalen Ford, David Benda grouping. I think this is a more talented group than that. Ant Hill, he's in every top 100 or top 50 college football player rankings that I've seen in the preseason. He's been in the top 5 in pretty much all of them. All-American, you have your All-American caliber player there. Leona Lafau was hurt at the end of last year. I expect big things from him. I'm expecting really big things from Ty Anthony Smith. Trey Moore's going to play some linebacker. That upgrades the room talent-wise and depth-wise. And then You have a Bo Barnes. Like, I just think the linebacker room, you can even play Brad Spence there. From an overall talent and depth standpoint, I think the room's a little bit better than last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think really the difference will be kind of in the playmaking aspect of it. I think a year 3 of Anthony Hill. I think Ty Anthony Smith, we've mentioned. Leon Lafau, I think having been a starter last year and having that year of experience. I think the combination of experience, talent, and kind of like know-how will kind of combine into this group creating a little bit more turnovers for this defense. And I think that all adds up in this group being upgraded.
Yep. And then lastly, before we wrap things up, secondary. You can break it down how you want to. You can go corners and safeties if you want to do it that way, or just the entire group as a whole. What is your verdict on the secondary?
I'll separate them. I'll go corners and safeties.
Okay.
So first with the corners, you have Jalen Gilbo, obviously, Kobe Black, Santana Wilson, who's a redshirt freshman as well. And then, of course, you can't forget to mention on the other side, Malik Muhammad. So this is a really good group. I mean, this group lost a first round pick in Jade Barron, one of the best corners in the country. Um, so it is like really hard to say upgraded. Like with that being said, though, like
I was gonna say neutral for the
yeah, I
corners.
think I'm gonna say neutral because I do expect to see some of these safeties get work at corner also here and there, like Michael Taft. Like I expect them to kind of move around. Um, so I think it'll be neutral. I think they'll get the same level of play out of these guys.
I'm gonna say neutral. I don't know if they're gonna have a guy that has the season that Jade Barron had
Yeah,
last year, but I do think, based on what I've heard in fall camp, one of the things the coaching staff is the most excited about is Malik Muhammad and his ability or his knack for making plays on the ball in some of these scrimmages and getting some interceptions. I think that's the next step for him to become an elite player. Is just playmaking, similar to how you thought about the linebackers and how Anthony Hill can probably do a little bit more in that area. Um, I expect big things from him. And then I've been really high on Jalen Gilbo based on what I've heard. And I think Kobe Black's going to just, it's a little bit of a struggle for him last year when he got in. Teams went at him a little bit just because he was a freshman. But I think with another year and another like 30 practices or so, I think he's going to be pretty good. A guy that you can rely on. So I don't think it's quite as good as last year, but because of Malik Muhammad and how I expect him to make more plays, and then Jalen Gilbo, who I think is a really good player. Um, both those guys are like early day one, day two talents. I think you can say neutral for the corners. At safety, the talent is upgraded from last year. For half of last year, they didn't even have Derek Williams. Michael Tass, an All American, coming back for another year. And then you add in a Jelani McDonald at that position, who's going to play a lot more. And then you could have Xavier Filsaime, a 5-star. You could have a Jonah Williams. Like, they have so many guys at that safety spot.
yeah,
I'm gonna say the safety position, as long as Derek Williams is healthy, is slightly upgraded.
yeah. I think that's fair. I think I'm right there with you. I'm gonna say upgraded also.
Okay. Well, there it is, folks. Right at 59 minutes. We covered a lot of ground just now.
Ooh, we
Any
did forget to touch on tight end. Do you want to touch on that real fast?
Yeah. We can touch on tight end, absolutely. So right now, I think Jack Injuries is your starter. He actually started fall camp like with like the third strings, but that's kind of how they like to do with these transfers. You don't just get to be a starter right away. So he quickly ascended. I think he'll be one of Arch's favorite targets, if I had to guess. That's a guy who had over 600 yards in a major conference last year. Like, he's going to be a major part of this offense. It needs to be. And then I've heard good things about Spencer Shannon, and also Amari Winston / Nick Townsend. I don't expect Nick Townsend to have a huge. He's not going to have really any role in this game coming up against Ohio State. None of those guys will, but in those games in September, I think you're gonna see some of those freshmen get some playing time.
Yeah.
But right now it's clearly Jack injuries, and then maybe a Spencer Shannon who's been in the program for a while, knows the offense, and is a really good, at the very least, can serve as like an extra offensive lineman.
Yeah, I think the verdict here is I think it's probably, we covered it last week, but it's probably downgraded in the short term, but upgraded in the long term. And we'll get like a slightly lower than Gunnar Helm type of level from Jack Endries this year, but in a different way. I think Jack Endries is going to be a little bit more dynamic in the run after catch game. So I think we'll use him a little bit on screens, short passes, those sorts of things. Not as often in terms of an inline blocker.
Yeah, I would agree. That's tight end. Anything else? This is our last real chance to talk about the roster in depth before we get into the season. We'll obviously be talking about the team in season, but anything else that you want to hit on or shout out, even if it's not directly related to Texas, just college football? Anything else?
I'll ask you a question and put you a little bit on the spot here. What's like one thing about this question, like about this Texas roster, like that the national public is missing about this team? What is the thing that is failing to be mentioned about why Texas will be successful this year?
Ooh, that's a great question. To
me, it's probably that edge room, probably that front seven in general.
I think number one for me, a lot of people are talking about the schedule for Texas and how it projects to be a little bit tougher than last year because of the road games that they will have to play. And I think the thing people are forgetting to mention is how good Texas as a program has been on the road the last 2.5 years.
Totally true.
I don't like it. It is true. Like, Arch is going to make his first true road game start in a big time environment in the Horseshoe next week. And they do have some new players. They have new players on the offensive line, new starters on the offensive line. But as a program, the culture has been flipped. They're not the same Texas that was 4 years ago when Sark took the job. And so I think, I'm not even saying they're going to win all those games, but I don't worry about them going on the road nearly as much. I don't worry about that being too much of an issue and like that being the reason their season gets derailed. I think they're winning at least one of those games, if not two of them. Because like I think pretty highly of Florida, but like I still need to see DJ Lagway be available over the course of like a month. Haven't seen that yet. And then Georgia's going to be like, I actually think because it's Julian Sayin making his first college start period, and because it's the first game of the season, 11 a.m., not a night game, and just because the volatility of Florida in some way, out of those 3 road games, the one I worry about the most is Georgia. And I don't know that it's particularly like, I don't know if this sounds insane to you, but that's the one I'm I'm the most intimidated by.
Yeah.
Especially if that's a night game, because Texas hasn't beaten Georgia yet. That's the team they're chasing the two teams. The two teams they're chasing are the two teams they're playing on the road. And so that makes this season really interesting. But that fact of like how Texas has the longest road winning streak in the country, I don't think people are talking about that enough.
Yeah. I think that's
And then
that's a good answer.
I think the second one is how much talent is going to be injected at the running back position if the two guys that were hurt last year are back. They were really thin at running back. And I don't think people like internally process how good and how critical it was to have a guy like Trey Wisner last year stepping in on the fly. And then they're going to get CJ Baxter back. They're getting Christian Clark involved. I think that, along with just like, yes, they might have 4 new starters along the offensive line, but Trevor Gooseby played in big games last year. Cole Hudson's played in over 30 games in his career. So while he's a new starter, he's not really new to playing in these environments. And then you have DJ Campbell, who's been in all of these environments already. So while they're playing technically 4 new starters, they still have experience in big games along this offensive line. It's just a matter of how do the younger players fill in at those 2 spots, left guard and right tackle. So it's things like that, like small things like that I wouldn't expect the national media to necessarily be as plugged in on. But those are the things that came to my mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'll do it for this episode.
Yep.
Off the air, me and Michael are kind of discuss what the plan will be to kind of put a bow on the off season and kind of lead into the regular season here now that it's game week. So stay tuned for a in-depth Texas at Ohio State preview.
Yep.
It'll go along with all those big time games in week 1. There's gonna be
Clemson,
there's going to be a
LSU.
lot of good football played next Saturday. So
Clem,
mark your calendar if you haven't already. I don't know how you
yeah,
have it yet, but
we're gonna
do it.
we're gonna do something like this. We haven't discussed it off the air yet, but it's gonna be something along the lines of Texas, Ohio State, and we'll have to kind of discuss how we want to talk about these games and like what are the things we want to hit on. But I think it'll be something like, what are we watching for? Like, what are the questions we want answered in week 1 in these games? Something like that. So Texas, Ohio State, and Clemson, LSU are the marquee ones that I'm looking forward to the most. But you can also throw in like an Alabama, Florida State if you want to, or Miami, Notre Dame. I think is the other big one that we probably want to hit on. So it's games like that that I think will be really interesting. But for now, I got to go do something. We have NFL episodes that are going to be posted if they're not already. We've got, I think, 2 of them that still need to get up, and then we're in the process of recording that series. So stay tuned for that. But thank you guys for all your support. I got to go eat lunch. We recorded this in the morning. I actually kind of liked how that worked out.
Yeah, it worked out well.
But thank you to Emmy. Thank you to all of you. And we will see you on the other side. We'll have one more episode, as we said, before the game, and then we're into the season. So hook 'em horns. Let's beat Ohio State, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace out.